I stared at the frozen turkey sitting on the counter. It was a 20-pound bird rock, hard and sweating slightly in the frigid kitchen air. The heating system had been acting up all week, but my parents said they would call someone after the holidays. My breath puffed in little white clouds in front of my face. My phone lit up on the counter, vibrating against the marble. A group chat notification appeared. Mom created group holiday bliss. A photo loaded showing my mother Susan holding a champagne flute, beaming next to my father Jeffrey. In the background, my twin sisters Ashley and Jessica were already wearing oversized sunglasses, clinking glasses in what was clearly a first-class cabin. The caption read, "Finally some peace." Then a text message followed. "Simple and efficient boarding, now see you in 10 days. House alarm is set, do not wait up." I looked back at the turkey. I was 13 years old. I did not know how to cook a turkey. I did not know how to fix a furnace, and apparently I was not worth a plane ticket. I did not cry. I did not text back asking why. I just stood there in the cold, realizing that family was a word they used when it was convenient, and right now I was not. The silence in the house was heavy, like a physical weight pressing against my eardrums. I could not cook the turkey, so I found a frozen burrito in the back of the freezer. It was old and the wrapper was coated in frost, but it was calories. I put it in the microwave and pressed the button. The hum of the machine was the only sign of life in the entire house. Then with a sharp pop, the hum died. The little yellow light on the display vanished. The refrigerator motor shuddered and stopped. The power was out. I stood in the sudden absolute darkness of the kitchen. The cold, which had been creeping in from the edges of the room, now seemed to rush forward to claim the entire space. My breath was invisible now, lost in the black. I did not scream and I did not panic. I just calculated. I had a coat and I had blankets. I could survive the night if I stayed in one room. That was when a light swept across the kitchen window. Twin beams of high-intensity white light cut through the darkness, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the freezing air. A car was pulling into the driveway. For a second, a pathetic, childish part of me thought they had come back. I thought they had realized they could not leave a 13-year-old alone for 10 days. I ran to the window, but it was not my parents' sedan. It was a massive matte black SUV idling like a predator at the gate. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing a heavy wool coat that looked like it cost more than the car my mother drove. He did not rush. He walked to the front door with the steady, inevitable pace of a man who owned the ground he walked on. The doorbell did not ring because there was no power, but the heavy knock echoed through the foyer. I opened the door. I knew who he was, though I had only seen him in hushed conversations at funerals or in the background of old photo albums. Uncle Robert was the black sheep of the family. He was the billionaire industrialist my father called soulless, and my mother called dangerous. He did not say hello, and he did not offer a hug or a platitude. He looked at me, taking in my shivering frame, the dark house, and the frozen breath in the air. Then he looked past me into the black void of the hallway. They set the security alarm, he said, his voice like gravel, but they did not set up the auto-pay for the electric bill. He stepped inside, not waiting for an invitation, and checked his watch. "Uncle Robert," I whispered. He looked down at me, and his eyes were cold gray and completely devoid of pity. They were analytical, as if he were assessing a problem. "Pack a bag, Alyssa," he said, "essentials only. You are not staying in a museum." I asked where we were going, and he simply replied, "Away from here." I ran upstairs, and I did not pack toys or the photo of my family that sat on my nightstand. I packed clothes, my school books, and my laptop. It took me 4 minutes. When I came back down, he was standing in the kitchen, looking at the 20-pound turkey still sitting on the counter, useless and freezing. "Leave it," he said. "Let it rot as it suits them." I walked out the front door and climbed into the passenger seat of the SUV. The interior smelled of expensive leather, and it was warm. As we pulled away, I watched my childhood home disappear in the rearview mirror, swallowed by the dark. Living with Uncle Robert was not about healing, it was about recalibration. His house was a brutalist fortress of concrete and glass, perched on the edge of a cliff. It did not have cozy corners, it had sightlines and structural integrity. For the first few months, I tried to make myself invisible. I moved through rooms without a sound and retreated to the guest room before anyone could remember I was there. One evening, Robert found me sitting in the library watching him work. "You are doing it again," he said, without looking up. You think if you are quiet enough, you won't be a burden. You think silence is a deficit. He finally looked up, pinning me with that gray stare. You are wrong. Silence is data. He beckoned me over and pointed to a blueprint. Tell me what you see. I hesitated, then pointed out that the reception desk faced the window so the staff would be blinded and the elevators were too far from the entrance. Robert smiled, a terrifying sharp thing. Exactly. Your family ignored you, Alyssa, but while they were posing for photos, you were studying the room. He told me that being a shadow was not a weakness, it was power. From that day on, my education began. He did not buy me dolls or video games. Instead, he bought me books on structural engineering, contract law, and negotiation tactics. He taught me that architecture was not just about buildings. It was about controlling behavior. If you control the structure, he would say, you control the people inside it. My teenage years were not marked by proms or football games. They were marked by site visits and board meetings where I sat in the corner, taking notes on who was lying and who was desperate. I stopped checking my phone for texts from my mother. I stopped looking at the photos of their vacations in the Bahamas or the Alps. Those glossy images were just facades, and I was learning to look past the cladding to the rotting beams underneath. I was no longer the abandoned daughter. I was a project under construction, and the foundation was being poured with concrete, steel, and absolute cold resolve. By the time I was 16, I had learned more about leverage than most adults learn in a lifetime. But there was one lesson left. I needed a workspace. My desk was a card table I had salvaged from the basement, and it wobbled every time I erased a line. I found Robert in the solarium reviewing quarterly reports. I need a new desk, I said, and a drafting lamp because the lighting in my room is insufficient. He did not look up from his papers. How much, he asked. I told him $800. I blinked because I knew he was not stingy. He drove cars that cost more than houses. Why not just buy it, I asked. Because buying you furniture teaches you nothing, but building it teaches you everything, he replied. He slid a check across the table for $5,000. This is your budget. I do not want you to buy a desk, Alyssa. I want you to design a sanctuary. He looked at me then, his eyes boring into mine. Your family made you feel unsafe in your own home. They made you feel like a guest who overstayed their welcome. I want you to build a room where you are the authority, where you feel untouchable. If you can build that, you can build anything. I spent the next 3 months obsessed. I did not just buy furniture. I curated an environment. I tore up the carpet to reveal the concrete subfloor. I painted the walls a deep slate gray that absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. I designed a custom L-shaped desk and hired a local welder to build the frame, negotiating the price down by pointing out flaws in his previous work. I installed soundproofing and bought an ergonomic chair that felt like a cockpit. I created a space that was not soft or pretty. It was a command center. When it was finished, I called Robert in. He stood in the doorway, his eyes scanning the room. He checked the welds on the desk, tested the throw of the light, and noted the acoustic panels. He turned to me and gave just one sharp, decisive nod. Good, he said. That nod was worth more than the $5,000. It was validation. It was the first time an adult had looked at something I created and treated it with respect. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing with the ghost life of my other family. Mom just landed in Aspen. The twins look adorable in their ski gear. Dad texting that he hoped I was studying hard. I scrolled past the photos of them drinking hot cocoa in a lodge I would never visit. I looked at their smiling, vacuous faces. Years ago, that would have crushed me. I would have wondered what was wrong with me. But sitting in my gray, silent sanctuary surrounded by the smell of fresh paint and ozone, I realized something. Their rejection had not broken me. It had freed me. I did not need their approval to fill a room. I could build my own walls. The years blurred into a singular focus. I graduated high school early and went to architecture school, funded entirely by Robert, who called it an investment in infrastructure. I graduated top of my class. I started my own firm at 24. By 28, I was designing skylines. I was the architect, and my foundation was unshakable. Uncle Robert did not fade. He concluded. It was a business decision. His heart was failing, the structural integrity compromised beyond repair. He refused the hospital and chose the master bedroom overlooking the ocean. 2 days before the end, he summoned me. He was not sentimental. He was strategic. "Sit," he rasped, his voice like dry leaves on concrete. He pointed to a thick, sealed manila envelope on the nightstand. "That is the demolition order. Do not open it until the reading." "I won't," I promised. "They will come back, Alyssa," he warned. "The moment the heart monitor flatlines, they will smell the money. They think I am their ATM. They think you are the janitor." He gripped my wrist with surprising strength. "Don't let them in. Not into your head, not into this house." He died on a Tuesday morning, efficiently, between the hours of 4 and 5 a.m. I didn't cry then. I had work to do. I called the lawyer, the funeral home, and secured the perimeter. The funeral was held 3 days later. It was supposed to be a small private service at the Cliffside Chapel. But at 10:55 a.m., a fleet of 3 stretched limousines rolled up the gravel drive. My family stepped out, dressed in designer morning wear. My mother, Susan, practically collapsed into my father's arms, sobbing loudly for a brother she hadn't spoken to in 15 years. My sisters, Ashley and Jessica, were live-streaming their grief, dabbing at dry eyes with lace handkerchiefs. They looked like a bad production of a Greek tragedy. I stood by the grave, wearing a sharp charcoal suit I designed myself. They walked right past me. They didn't see the CEO of a multi-million-dollar firm. They saw the 13-year-old girl in the frozen kitchen. They saw a non-entity. "Poor Robert," I heard Susan whisper loud enough for half the congregation to hear. "Thank God he didn't marry. The estate should cover the bankruptcy and the renovations on the summer house." They weren't mourning, they were calculating. After the service, they cornered me near the hearse. They didn't hug me or ask how I was. "Alyssa," my father said, his voice dripping with that familiar patronizing tone, "you look tired." He thought I was the nurse. "We will take it from here, sweetie," my mother added, patting my arm with a gloved hand. "You have done your duty. We are going to head up to the house to appraise the furniture. We need to see what is worth keeping before the estate sale." She held out her hand. "Do you have the keys, or do we need to call a locksmith?" I looked at them, and suddenly the architecture of their cruelty made perfect sense. For them to be the golden family, they needed a failure. They needed me to be the broken, abandoned niece who scrubbed the floors. If they acknowledged that I was the one in power, that I was the architect, their entire self-image would collapse. They needed me to be small so they could feel big. They weren't just vultures. They were parasites starving for a host. "The lawyer has the keys," I lied, my voice flat and cold. "The reading is tomorrow at the firm. Until then, the house is sealed." The conference room at the law firm was designed to intimidate. It was all dark mahogany, floor-to-ceiling windows, and air conditioning set to a temperature that kept you awake. My family sat on one side of the table. I sat on the other. Jeffrey was checking his watch, while Susan was whispering to the twins, who were already scrolling through real estate listings on their phones. They were already spending the money. They looked at me only once, with a mixture of pity and annoyance, like I was a stain on the tablecloth they couldn't quite scrub out. The lawyer, Mr. Sterling, entered the room carrying a single thin file folder. "Robert preferred efficiency," he said, his voice dry as dust. "So I will be brief. Just read the numbers," Jeffrey said, leaning back in his chair. We know he was liquid. Sterling ignored him. To my brother Jeffrey, he read, "I leave you the debt you accrued in 1998. The promissory note for the failed venture is hereby forgiven. You are now solvent." "You are welcome," Jeffrey blinked. "What?" "That debt was written off years ago. Where is the cash?" Sterling continued reading, ignoring the outburst. To my sister-in-law Susan, Sterling read, "I leave you the silence you gave your daughter. May it bring you the same comfort it brought her." Susan's mouth fell open, her face pale. "I don't understand," she whispered. "Is this a joke?" And finally Sterling said, looking directly at me, "To my niece Alyssa, the architect of her own life, I leave the entirety of my estate. The firm, the properties, the investment portfolios, and all residual assets. Everything." The silence in the room lasted exactly 3 seconds before it detonated into chaos. "That is illegal," Jeffrey screamed, slamming his hand on the table. He was senile. She manipulated him. "We are contesting this." Ashley and Jessica joined in. shouting about their money and their rights as family. I didn't move or speak. I watched them unravel like a building with a failed foundation. Sterling raised a hand to quiet them. "There is one more document," he said. He pulled a yellowed piece of paper from the folder. It was dated 15 years ago, the day they left me for the Bahamas. I recognized Robert's sharp handwriting next to the careless signatures of my parents. It was a loan agreement for $500,000 to cover gambling debts. Robert had agreed to pay it on one condition, which Sterling read aloud. In exchange for this sum, Jeffrey and Susan Miller agreed to waive all parental claim to Alyssa Miller. They agreed to transfer physical custody and cease all financial and emotional support. They agree the child is the burden of the lender. The world stopped. They hadn't just forgotten me, they had sold me. $500,000 was my price tag. I looked at my parents. I expected shame, but I only saw annoyance. "We were in a bind," Jeffrey said defensively. "He had all the money. We gave you a better life, didn't we?" I stood up, the chair scraping loudly. "It cost you exactly $500,000, I said, and you spent it all. You traded a daughter for a lifestyle, and the transaction is complete." I walked out of the room, past their desperate pleas, and drove to the cliffside house. My house. Security was already escorting my parents' car off the property. Jeffrey rolled down his window to scream one last time, but I simply told him to get off my property before I had him arrested. I went inside and turned the lock. Click. It was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. I opened my laptop and one by one deleted every contact and blocked every number. The house was silent, and for the first time, it was perfect.